Maya Chen pressed her palm against the smooth metal wall of the transport shuttle, watching the familiar blue marble of Earth grow larger through the viewport. 3 years had passed since she'd last seen her home planet, 3 years of military academies on distant worlds and combat training that had transformed her from a frightened teenager into something else entirely. The reflection staring back at her bore little resemblance to the girl who had once walked the halls of Jefferson High School. The plasma burn scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw caught the light, a permanent reminder of the Battle of Kepler 442b. Her dark hair, once long and carefully styled, now hung in a practical shoulder-length cut that wouldn't interfere with helmet seals. But it was her eyes that had changed the most. Where once there had been innocence and curiosity, now there was the steady, calculating gaze of someone who had seen too much, too young. Approaching Earth orbit, the shuttle's AI announced in its cheerfully synthetic voice. Estimated time to surface, 47 minutes. Maya shifted in her seat, the motion causing her military-issue jacket to fall open slightly, revealing the collection of commendation ribbons on her chest. The Galactic Defense Medal. The Purple Heart equivalent for off-world combat. The Silver Star for extraordinary heroism during the siege of New Babylon. Each one represented moments when she had chosen to fight rather than flee, when her human stubbornness and refusal to give up had made the difference between victory and defeat. The other passengers on the transport gave her a wide berth. Most were civilians returning from business trips to the outer colonies, their soft faces and comfortable clothes marking them as people who had never seen real conflict. They whispered among themselves, stealing glances at her scars and medals, trying to piece together her story from the visible evidence. Maya didn't mind their stares. She had grown used to being an object of curiosity and sometimes fear. At 17, she was already a decorated veteran of 3 major campaigns against the hegemony, the aggressive alien coalition that had been steadily expanding into human space for the past decade. Her reputation preceded her wherever she went in military circles, but, here among civilians, she was just another soldier coming home. The shuttle began its descent through Earth's atmosphere, and Maya felt the familiar tug of gravity that was just a little stronger than the artificial gravity she had grown accustomed to on military vessels. Below them, the sprawling metroplex of Greater Los Angeles stretched to the horizon, a vast urban landscape that seemed almost quaint compared to the towering spire cities she had seen on other worlds. Her destination was different, though. While most passengers would be staying in the city, Maya was headed to the suburbs, to a place she had never expected to see again. Jefferson High School had sent her a formal invitation to attend their annual Career Day presentation, apparently unaware that the Maya Chen who had graduated 3 years ago was very different from the one who would be walking through their doors. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same school that had once suspended her for fighting bullies was now asking her to speak about her military career. The same hallways where she had been tormented for being different, for being the quiet Asian girl who kept to herself, would now echo with her footsteps as a war hero. As the shuttle touched down at the civilian spaceport, Maya gathered her single duffel bag and prepared to disembark. She had learned to travel light during her military service, carrying only what was absolutely necessary. Everything she owned could fit in one bag, a stark contrast to the material excess she remembered from her teenage years. The spaceport was bustling with activity, a constant flow of humans and friendly alien species moving through the terminal. Maya noticed how easily the civilians interacted with the various alien traders and diplomats, completely unaware that some species that looked harmless were actually part of the hegemony's intelligence network. Her training made her automatically catalog potential threats, identify escape routes, and assess the tactical situation of any space she entered. A young port worker, probably around her own age, approached her with a tablet. "Excuse me, are you Maya Chen?" She nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "There's someone here to meet you," he said, gesturing toward the arrival lounge. Maya followed his directions and found herself face to face with a woman in her 50s wearing a conservatively cut business suit. The woman's eyes widened slightly when she saw Maya's scars, but she quickly composed herself and extended a hand. "Maya, I'm Principal Morrison. I replaced Principal Edwards 2 years ago." She paused, clearly struggling with how to address someone who was technically still a teenager but carried herself like a combat veteran. "I want to thank you for agreeing to speak at our career day. The students are very excited to hear from someone with your unique experiences." Maya shook the offered hand, noting the woman's soft grip and the way she unconsciously stepped back slightly. "Thank you for the invitation, Principal Morrison. I hope I can provide some value to your students." As they walked through the spaceport toward the ground transportation area, Principal Morrison kept up a steady stream of nervous chatter about the school's improvements, new programs, and academic achievements. Maya listened politely, but her attention was focused on their surroundings and the subtle changes in the people around them. Earth felt different now. 3 years of war had left their mark even on the civilian population. There was an underlying tension in the air, a constant awareness that the conflict with the hegemony was far from over. News feeds playing on public screens showed updates from the front lines, casualty reports from distant battles, and political debates about military spending and draft policies. The ground car ride to Jefferson High took them through neighborhoods Maya remembered from her childhood, but everything seemed smaller somehow, more fragile. The houses with their manicured lawns and white picket fences looked like toys compared to the massive defensive installations she had seen on border worlds. These people had no idea how close the war had come to Earth, how many times human forces had been the thin line between civilization and annihilation. "We've made some changes to the school since you graduated," Principal Morrison was saying. "New security systems, updated emergency protocols. We've also added some courses on galactic citizenship and off-world career preparation." Maya nodded absently, her mind wandering to her last day at Jefferson High. She had been 18 then, having started school late due to her family's frequent moves during her father's military career. Most of her classmates had been younger, and the age gap had been just one more thing that set her apart from her peers. She remembered the final confrontation with Derek Lawson and his group of followers. They had cornered her in the parking lot after school, angry about her refusal to be intimidated by their constant harassment. The fight had been brief but decisive, with Maya's martial arts training allowing her to handle multiple attackers despite being outnumbered. The resulting suspension had actually been a relief, giving her an excuse to graduate early and enlist in the Galactic Defense Force. Now she was returning as someone those same bullies would cross the street to avoid. The thought should have been satisfying, but, instead, it felt hollow. The problems that had seemed so important in high school were insignificant compared to the life and death struggles she had faced in the years since. The school came into view as they rounded a corner, and Maya felt a strange mix of nostalgia and disconnection. Jefferson High looked exactly the same, a sprawling complex of brick buildings connected by covered walkways, surrounded by playing fields and parking lots. Students moved between classes in the same patterns she remembered, their voices and laughter carrying across the campus in familiar rhythms. But Maya saw it all through different eyes now. The buildings were made of materials that wouldn't survive a plasma bombardment. The emergency exits were inadequate for a real evacuation. The security systems were designed to handle teenage troublemakers, not trained infiltrators or terrorist attacks. In her mind, she was already planning defensive positions and escape routes, habits ingrained by years of military training. Principal Morrison led her to the main office, where a small crowd of faculty members had gathered to meet her. Their reactions ranged from curious excitement to barely concealed shock at her appearance. Maya endured the introductions and small talk with practiced patience, answering their questions about her service with carefully neutral responses. "The career day presentation isn't until tomorrow," Principal Morrison explained, "but I thought you might like to observe some classes today, get reacquainted with the school environment." Maya agreed, though she suspected the real reason was to give the staff time to process her presence and prepare the students for what they were about to encounter. She spent the morning sitting in on various classes, watching teenagers who seemed impossibly young and innocent compared to the soldiers she had been commanding in combat just weeks ago. In the history class, the teacher was covering the early years of human space exploration, presenting events that Maya had learned about in military academy as tactical case studies rather than historical milestones. When the teacher mentioned the first contact with hostile aliens, several students asked excited questions about space battles and alien technology, treating warfare like an adventure from a video game. Maya bit her tongue, resisting the urge to tell them about the reality of combat, about watching friends die in the vacuum of space, about the weight of command when every decision meant life or death for the people under her care. These children deserved their innocence for as long as possible. The English class was studying a unit on war literature, including some contemporary works about the ongoing conflict with the hegemony. Maya was surprised to see her own name mentioned in one of the texts, a brief reference to the Battle of Kepler 442b and the human force's unexpected victory against overwhelming odds. The students discussed the events with the detached analysis of people reading about ancient history, unaware that one of the key participants was sitting in their classroom. During lunch, Maya found herself in the cafeteria where she had once sat alone, the target of whispered conversations and pointed stares. Now she attracted attention for entirely different reasons. Students tried to sneak photos with their phones, whispering excitedly about the decorated soldier in their midst. Word had spread quickly through the school's social networks, and Maya could see the mixture of fascination and fear in the young faces around her. A group of seniors approached her table hesitantly, led by a confident-looking girl with perfectly styled hair and designer clothes. Maya recognized the type immediately, the popular crowd, the social elite who had made her life miserable during her own time at Jefferson High. "Excuse me," the girl said, her voice carefully polite, "are you really a war hero? Like, have you actually killed aliens and stuff?" Maya studied the girl's face, seeing the same casual cruelty that had made her teenage years so difficult, now wrapped in a veneer of curiosity rather than open hostility. "I've served in combat situations," she replied carefully. "War isn't about being a hero. It's about doing what needs to be done to protect people." "But, isn't it exciting?" another student chimed in. "Flying through space, fighting aliens, saving the galaxy?" The question hit Maya like a physical blow, transporting her instantly back to the command deck of the destroyer Indomitable during the siege of New Babylon. She could smell the acrid smoke from burning consoles, hear the screams of wounded crew members, feel the desperate weight of command as enemy forces overwhelmed their defenses. Exciting wasn't the word she would use. "It's a job," she said finally. "A necessary one, but not something to romanticize." The students seemed disappointed by her response, clearly expecting more dramatic stories of heroism and adventure. They drifted away after a few more questions, leaving Maya alone with her memories and the untouched cafeteria food that reminded her too much of military rations. The afternoon brought more classes and more curious stares, but also something unexpected. In the last period physics class, Maya encountered a familiar face that made her stop short in the doorway. Derek Lawson stood at the front of the classroom, now wearing a teacher's casual attire instead of the letterman jacket she remembered. He looked older, more mature, but the recognition in his eyes was immediate and uncomfortable. "Class," he said, his voice steady despite the obvious tension, "we have a special visitor today. This is Maya Chen, a Jefferson High graduate who has gone on to serve with distinction in the Galactic Defense Force." The students turned to look at Maya with the same mix of curiosity and awe she had been experiencing all day, but her attention was focused entirely on Derek. The man who had once made her life miserable was now introducing her to his students as if nothing had happened between them. She took a seat at the back of the classroom and watched as Derek taught a lesson on orbital mechanics and space navigation, subjects that had practical applications in her military career. He was a good teacher, she realized, patient with struggling students and enthusiastic about his subject matter. It was difficult to reconcile this version of him with her memories of the bullying teenager. When the class ended and the students filed out, Derek approached her with obvious nervousness. "Maya," he said, extending his hand tentatively. "It's good to see you again. I heard about your service, your achievements. Congratulations." Maya looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment before shaking it. "Derek. I didn't expect to see you here. I came back after college," he explained. "Got my teaching degree, wanted to give something back to the community." He paused, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, Maya, I know we didn't part on good terms. The way I treated you in high school. I was young and stupid, and I'm sorry. I've wanted to apologize for years." The apology hung in the air between them, carrying the weight of years and the distance that Maya had traveled both physically and emotionally since their last encounter. She studied his face, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives, but saw only genuine regret and nervous sincerity. "We were different people then," she said finally. "You're not responsible for the choices I made afterward." "Still," Derek insisted, "I want you to know that I'm proud of what you've accomplished. The students today were talking about you like you're some kind of legend." "Maybe they're right." Maya felt uncomfortable with the praise, with the idea that her military service made her somehow heroic or legendary. She had done what needed to be done, made the choices that circumstances required, but she didn't feel like a legend. She felt tired, scarred, and older than her years. "I should go," she said, gathering her things. "I need to prepare for tomorrow's presentation." Derek nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. "Maya," he called as she reached the door. "For what it's worth, I always knew you were stronger than the rest of us. I just wish it hadn't taken me so long to realize that strength wasn't something to tear down." Maya paused in the doorway but didn't turn around. "Take care of them," she said, gesturing toward the empty classroom. "They're going to need teachers who understand that the galaxy is bigger and more dangerous than they imagine." She walked out into the hallway, leaving Derek standing alone among the desks and textbooks, surrounded by the echoes of lessons about orbital mechanics and the vast emptiness between stars. Tomorrow she would return to speak to the entire student body, to try to convey something meaningful about service and sacrifice to young people who still thought of war as an adventure. But tonight, she would sit in her hotel room and prepare for the most difficult mission of her military career, trying to bridge the gap between the girl she had been and the soldier she had become, in front of an audience that included both the people who had shaped her and the ones she was fighting to protect. The alarm in Maya's hotel room chimed softly at 0500 hours, though she had been awake for the past 2 hours, staring at the ceiling and running through her presentation in her mind. Military training had conditioned her to wake early and stay alert, but it was more than habit that kept her from sleeping. Today she would face the largest audience of her speaking career, and, for the first time in 3 years of combat, she felt genuinely nervous. She had spent the previous evening reviewing her notes and practicing her delivery, but every version felt wrong somehow. How do you explain the reality of interstellar warfare to teenagers who think conflict resolution means blocking someone on social media? How do you convey the weight of command to kids who have never been responsible for anything more important than a group project? Maya, dressed in her formal military uniform, the dark blue fabric crisp and perfectly pressed, the ribbons and decorations arranged in precise regulation order. The uniform transformed her, she knew, from a scarred teenager into something that commanded respect and attention. It was armor of a different sort, protection against the vulnerability she felt when facing crowds of civilians. The hotel's complimentary breakfast was a stark reminder of the abundance that Earth's civilians took for granted. Fresh fruit, real eggs, actual coffee made from beans grown in soil rather than synthesized in ship galleys. Maya ate sparingly, her stomach tight with anticipation, while around her business travelers and tourists chatted about their plans for the day. A newsfeed playing on the restaurant's screens caught her attention. The headline scrolled past in bright red letters: "Hegemony Forces Advance on Colony World Haven." Maya's fork paused halfway to her mouth as she read the details. Haven was a peaceful agricultural world, home to nearly 2 million human colonists. Intelligence reports suggested the hegemony wanted it for its strategic location rather than its resources, which meant the civilian population was expendable. She thought about the friends she had left behind on the front lines, the soldiers who were probably preparing for deployment to Haven at this very moment. While she sat in safety on Earth, giving speeches to high school students, people she cared about were heading into another desperate battle against overwhelming odds. The irony was bitter in her mouth. She was being celebrated as a hero for past actions while the war continued without her, claiming new victims every day. Part of her wanted to abandon the presentation, catch the next transport to the recruitment center, and rejoin the fight where she belonged. But duty had many forms, and she had committed to this mission just as surely as any combat assignment. Maya finished her breakfast in silence and prepared to face Jefferson High School. Principal Morrison met her in the parking lot, looking nervous and excited in equal measure. "The auditorium is already full," she explained as they walked toward the main building. "We had to set up overflow seating in the gymnasium and stream the presentation to classrooms. Word spread beyond our own students, we have people from other schools, parents, even some local media." Maya nodded absently, her attention focused on the groups of students gathered around the campus. They watched her approach with a mixture of awe and curiosity that made her uncomfortable. Some held up phones to record her arrival, others whispered excitedly to their friends. She had become a spectacle, a celebrity, when all she wanted was to do her job and disappear back into anonymity. The auditorium was indeed packed, with every seat filled and people standing along the walls. Maya estimated nearly 800 attendees, far larger than any crowd she had addressed before. The stage lights created a bright island surrounded by darkness, making it impossible to see individual faces in the audience beyond the first few rows. Principal Morrison introduced her with a lengthy recitation of her military achievements, awards, and commendations that made Maya cringe internally. Each medal and decoration represented moments of terror and loss that couldn't be captured in official citations. The Battle of Kepler 442b wasn't just a tactical victory worthy of commendation, it was the day she watched her mentor, Colonel Martinez, die in a reactor explosion while buying them time to evacuate wounded soldiers. When she finally stepped up to the podium, Maya felt the weight of hundreds of expectant gazes. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of ventilation systems and the distant sounds of normal school operations in other parts of the building. 3 years ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. I was sitting in seats just like yours, wondering what I was going to do with my life. I was angry, isolated, and convinced that nothing I did would ever matter. I was wrong about that last part, but it took a war to teach me the difference between mattering and being comfortable. She paused, scanning the sea of young faces before her. In the front rows, she could see teachers she remembered, including Derek Lawson, who watched her with an expression of careful attention. Further back, students leaned forward in their seats, hanging on every word. You've been told that I'm here to talk about career opportunities in the military, about the exciting possibilities of serving in the Galactic Defense Force. But I'm not here to recruit anyone. I'm here to tell you the truth about what service means, both the parts that look good on news feeds and the parts that keep you awake at night. A ripple of surprise went through the audience. This wasn't the patriotic recruitment speech they had been expecting. Maya continued, finding her rhythm as the words began to flow more naturally. War isn't an adventure. It's not a video game where you respawn after making a mistake. It's not a movie where heroes always win and justice always prevails. War is about making impossible choices under unimaginable pressure, and living with the consequences of those choices for the rest of your life. She told them about New Babylon, about the siege that lasted for 6 months while human forces held off a hegemony fleet 10 times their size. She described the daily reality of combat, the exhaustion, the fear, the weight of responsibility when other people's lives depend on your decisions. She talked about friends who didn't come home, about victories that felt like defeats, about the slow erosion of the person you used to be under the pressure of constant conflict. I joined the military because I was running away from problems that seemed overwhelming at the time, she admitted. Bullying, social isolation, feeling like I didn't fit in anywhere. Those problems followed me to basic training, to officer school, to my first assignment. You can't run away from yourself, no matter how far you travel. A student in the middle section raised her hand tentatively. Maya nodded for her to speak. If military service is so difficult, why do you keep doing it? Why not just quit and come home? It was the question Maya had been asking herself for months, especially during the darkest moments of recent campaigns. Why continue fighting when every victory seemed to lead to another battle, another list of casualties, another impossible mission? Because someone has to, she said simply. Because there are people counting on us to stand between them and forces that would destroy everything we care about. Because the alternative to fighting is surrender, and surrender means the end of human civilization as we know it. She gestured toward the windows that looked out over the peaceful campus. This school, your homes, your families, your future plans, they all exist because people you'll never meet are fighting and dying in places you'll never see to keep the hegemony from reaching Earth. That's not heroism, it's just necessity. Another hand went up, this time from a boy in the back who looked barely old enough to be in high school. Do you ever regret enlisting? Do you wish you had stayed here and lived a normal life? Maya considered the question carefully. It was something she had wondered about during quiet moments between battles, when she saw civilians going about their ordinary lives with ordinary problems and ordinary joys. I regret the necessity that made my choice inevitable, she answered finally. I regret that young people like you might have to make the same choice someday. But I don't regret the service itself. Military life has shown me capabilities I didn't know I had, forced me to grow in ways that a comfortable civilian life never would have. It's made me part of something larger than myself, something that matters more than personal happiness or individual success. The questions continued for another hour, ranging from technical inquiries about military technology to personal questions about dealing with trauma and loss. Maya answered them all with the same careful honesty, refusing to romanticize her experiences while also avoiding the kind of graphic details that would give these young people nightmares. When Principal Morrison finally called for the last question, a girl in the front row stood up. Maya recognized her as one of the popular students who had approached her during lunch the previous day. "What would you want to tell your younger self, if you could go back to when you were a student here?" Maya smiled slightly, the first time her expression had softened during the entire presentation. "I would tell her that being different isn't a weakness, that the things that make you feel isolated and alone might someday become your greatest strengths. I would tell her that the opinions of people who don't know or understand her don't define her worth. And I would tell her to be patient, because the person she's becoming is someone worth becoming, even if the path is harder than she imagines." The applause that followed was subdued, thoughtful rather than enthusiastic. Maya had given them something to think about rather than something to feel good about, and she could see the mental wheels turning in many young faces as they processed what they had heard. After the formal presentation ended, Maya was surrounded by small groups of students and teachers who wanted to continue the conversation. Some asked for autographs or photos, but most had deeper questions about military life, about finding purpose, about making difficult choices. She answered them all patiently, recognizing something of her younger self in their earnest curiosity. A senior named James approached her during a lull in the crowd. He was tall and thin, with the kind of nervous energy that Maya remembered from her own teenage years. "I've been thinking about enlisting," he said quietly. "My grades aren't good enough for college, and I don't really know what else to do with my life." Maya studied his face carefully, seeing the uncertainty and desperation that drove so many young people to military recruitment offices. "What do your parents think about that idea?" "They're against it," he admitted. "They want me to go to community college, maybe learn a trade. They think the military is too dangerous, especially with the war going on." "They're right about the danger," Maya said bluntly. "But that's only one factor to consider. The military can provide structure, purpose, and opportunities for people who need them. It can also break people who aren't ready for the demands it places on them. The question you need to ask yourself isn't whether you want to join the military. The question is whether you're prepared to sacrifice your individual desires for something larger than yourself, and whether you can live with the consequences of that choice." She gave him her contact information and encouraged him to think carefully before making any commitments. There were other options, other paths to finding meaning and purpose, but the military was a door that, once opened, changed everything that came after. As the crowd gradually dispersed, Maya found herself alone in the auditorium with Derek Lawson. He had waited patiently through all the other conversations, and now approached her with the same nervous energy she remembered from their encounter the previous day. "That was nothing like what I expected," he said, settling into a seat beside her in the front row. "Most military speakers who come through here focus on benefits, training opportunities, the chance to see the galaxy. You made it sound like a calling rather than a career choice." Maya leaned back in her chair, suddenly feeling the exhaustion that always followed public appearances. Because that's what it is. People who join for the benefits or the adventure usually wash out during their first assignment. The ones who last are the ones who find meaning in the service itself, who can accept sacrifice as the price of protecting something they value. Derek was quiet for a moment, staring up at the empty stage where Maya had delivered her presentation. "I keep thinking about what you said to my physics class yesterday, about taking care of these kids because they're going to need teachers who understand how dangerous the galaxy is. Do you really think the war is going to reach Earth?" It was a question that military personnel weren't supposed to answer in public forums, but Derek wasn't asking as a civilian seeking classified information. He was asking as someone responsible for preparing young minds for an uncertain future. "The hegemony's expansion has been consistent and methodical," Maya said carefully. "They take systems that provide strategic advantage, then use those positions to launch attacks against the next tier of targets. Earth's defenses are strong, but they're not impenetrable. Every battle we lose brings them closer to the core worlds." She turned to look at him directly. "But that's not something to panic about or lose sleep over." It's something to prepare for intelligently. These kids need to understand that the comfortable, safe world they've grown up in might not last forever. They need skills, mental toughness, and the ability to make hard choices under pressure. Is that why you really came back here? Derek asked. Not to recruit soldiers, but to prepare them for a future where everyone might need to be a little more like soldiers? Maya considered his words, recognizing a truth she hadn't fully articulated to herself. Maybe. The military teaches you that hoping for the best while preparing for the worst isn't pessimism, it's realism. These kids deserve to know what might be coming, so they can make informed decisions about their lives. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two people who had traveled very different paths from the same starting point. Maya thought about the presentation, about the questions the students had asked, about the uncertain future that lay ahead for all of them. I should probably head back to the recruitment center, she said finally. My transport leaves for the outer systems tomorrow. Derek looked surprised. You're going back? I thought maybe you were done with active duty, that's why you were doing speaking engagements. Maya shook her head. This was just temporary assignment. There's still a war going on, and they need experienced officers more than they need recruitment speakers. She paused, then added quietly, and I need to be there. It's where I belong. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, Derek stood and extended his hand one more time. Thank you, he said simply. For coming back, for being honest with them, for showing them what strength really looks like. Maya shook his hand, noting how much firmer his grip was than it had been the day before. Take care of them, she said again. And take care of yourself. Teachers matter more than they realize, especially when the world is changing as fast as ours is. She walked out of the auditorium and, through the familiar hallways of Jefferson High, past lockers and classrooms where ordinary teenagers were going about their ordinary lives, blissfully unaware of the extraordinary challenges that might await them. Maya envied them their innocence, even as she accepted the necessity of her role in protecting it. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the campus, and Maya could hear the sounds of after-school activities beginning, sports practices, club meetings, the normal rhythms of adolescent life. It was a good sound, a peaceful sound, and she carried it with her as she walked toward the parking lot and the waiting transport that would take her back to the stars. Tomorrow she would be aboard a military vessel, heading for another front in the endless war against the hegemony. But, today, she had planted seeds of understanding and preparation in the minds of young people who would inherit the consequences of that war, whatever its ultimate outcome. It wasn't the kind of victory that earned medals or commendations, but it might be the most important mission she had ever completed. 6 months later, Maya stood on the bridge of the destroyer Valiant, watching through the viewscreen as hegemony ships moved into attack formation around the beleaguered colony world of Haven. The agricultural planet hung in space like a blue-green jewel, its surface dotted with the lights of cities and farming settlements that housed nearly 2 million human souls. In 12 hours, those lights would either still be shining under human protection, or they would be extinguished forever under hegemony occupation. The enemy fleet was massive, easily 3 times the size of the human defense force that had managed to reach Haven before the invasion began. Maya counted 47 hegemony vessels ranging from massive dreadnoughts to swift attack cruisers, their alien hull designs gleaming like predatory insects in the star's harsh light. Against them, Admiral Chen commanded a hastily assembled task force of 16 human ships, most of them pulled from other engagements and operating below full strength. Maya held the rank of commander now, promoted after distinguished service during the Battle of Proxima Station 3 months earlier. At 18, she was the youngest ship commander in the Galactic Defense Force, a fact that would have been remarkable under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. The war with the hegemony had been grinding on for 4 years now, consuming experienced officers faster than the military academies could replace them. The Valiant was her first command, a destroyer that had seen better days but still carried enough firepower to make a difference in the coming battle. Her crew of 230 souls looked to her for leadership, for the kind of confidence and tactical brilliance that had made her reputation in previous engagements. But, looking at the overwhelming enemy force arrayed against them, Maya felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Commander, Lieutenant Torres called from the communications station. Admiral Chen is requesting all ship commanders to report to the flagship for final briefing. Maya nodded, straightening her uniform jacket with its collection of ribbons that seemed to grow heavier with each passing month. You have the bridge, Commander Singh. Continue monitoring enemy movements and be ready to execute evasive maneuvers on my return. The shuttle ride to the flagship Indomitable gave Maya a few minutes to collect her thoughts and review the tactical situation one more time. Haven's defenses consisted of a few orbital platforms and a small garrison of ground-based forces, nowhere near enough to repel a determined assault. The planet's value to the hegemony was strategic rather than economic. Its location would give them a staging area for attacks deeper into human space, potentially threatening the core worlds within a few years. The briefing room aboard the Indomitable was crowded with the commanders of every human vessel in the defense fleet. Maya recognized most of them, veterans of previous campaigns who had survived through a combination of skill, luck, and stubborn determination. They were good officers, experienced leaders, but she could see the strain of 4 years of continuous warfare in their faces. Admiral Chen looked older than his 55 years, his hair gone completely gray and deep lines etched around his eyes. He had been fighting the hegemony since the war's beginning, watching human territory steadily shrink as alien forces pushed inexorably toward Earth. The tactical display behind him showed the grim reality of their situation in stark detail. Ladies and gentlemen, the Admiral began, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through countless battles. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending this will be easy. We're outnumbered 3-1 by an enemy that knows our capabilities and has prepared specifically to counter them. Under normal tactical doctrine, we would withdraw and wait for reinforcements. He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. But there are no reinforcements coming. Every available ship is already committed to other fronts, and Haven's strategic importance means we cannot allow it to fall. We must win here, today, with what we have. The room was silent except for the hum of ventilation systems and the distant thrum of the ship's engines. Maya studied the faces around her, seeing the same mixture of determination and apprehension that she felt in her own chest. These were people who had volunteered to stand between humanity and extinction, but that didn't make them immune to fear or doubt. Admiral Chan activated the tactical display, showing the planned battle formation in 3 dimensions. Our strategy will focus on disrupting their command structure and exploiting their overconfidence. Intelligence suggests the hegemony commander considers this a routine occupation rather than a serious battle. We're going to prove him wrong. The plan was audacious and risky, relying on precise timing and coordination between multiple ship groups. Maya's destroyer squadron would lead a diversionary attack on the enemy's left flank, drawing their attention while the heavier cruisers attempted to break through the center and engage the hegemony command ships directly. It was the kind of strategy that either resulted in brilliant victory or catastrophic defeat, with very little middle ground. Questions? Admiral Chen asked when he finished outlining the battle plan. Commander Harrison of the cruiser Defiant raised his hand. Admiral, even if we succeed in disrupting their command structure, they still have significant numerical superiority. What's our extraction plan if the primary assault fails? Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but Maya caught the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested he had hoped no one would ask that particular question. There is no extraction plan, Commander. We hold this system or we die trying. Those are our orders, and, more importantly, that's our duty to the civilians on Haven and the billions of people in the systems behind us. The finality of that statement settled over the room like a shroud. Maya had been in desperate battles before, had faced impossible odds and somehow found a way to survive and win. But this felt different. This felt like a last stand, the kind of battle that historians would either celebrate as humanity's finest hour or mourn as the beginning of the end. After the briefing ended and the commanders returned to their ships, Maya found herself alone with Admiral Chen for a few moments. He had known her father during the early years of human space exploration, and their families had maintained contact even after military duty separated them across the galaxy. Commander Chen, he said, using her rank rather than addressing her informally, I'm giving your squadron the most dangerous assignment because I know you can handle it. Your people trust you, and, frankly, so do I. But I want you to understand what we're really asking of you today. Maya met his gaze steadily. You're asking us to buy time with our lives, sir? To make the enemy pay such a high price for this system that they think twice before attempting similar operations elsewhere.
Admiral Chen nodded grimly. That's exactly what I'm asking.
And I hate that I have to ask it of someone who should be starting college rather than commanding a warship. But this is the reality we face. The hegemony respects only strength, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to yield even when yielding would be easier. When Maya returned to the Valiant, she found her senior staff waiting in the briefing room for her report on the battle plan. These were people she had handpicked over the past 6 months, officers who had proven themselves in previous engagements and earned her trust through their competence and dedication. They deserved to know what they were facing. The mission is simple, she told them without preamble. We're going to attack a superior enemy force with insufficient resources and minimal chance of survival. We're going to do it anyway because 2 million civilians are counting on us, and because someone has to draw a line in space and say no further. Her executive officer, Commander Singh, was a veteran of the early war years who had seen more battles than most officers twice his age. What are our chances, Commander? He asked bluntly.
Maya appreciated his directness. Statistically?
Poor. But statistics don't account for human stubbornness, tactical innovation, or the fact that the enemy considers this a routine occupation rather than a serious fight. We're going to hit them harder than they expect, in ways they don't anticipate, and make them remember why humans are still here after 4 years of their best efforts to exterminate us. Lieutenant Torres, the communications officer, looked pale but determined.
Orders for the crew, Commander?
Tell them the truth, Maya said.
All of it.
They deserve to know what we're facing and why it matters. But also tell them that we've been in impossible situations before and found ways to win. Remind them that every major human victory in this war started with someone deciding to fight despite overwhelming odds. Over the next few hours, as the fleet moved into attack position, Maya walked the corridors of her ship and spoke with her crew. She found them preparing for battle with the calm professionalism that came from months of training and previous combat experience, but also with the nervous energy that preceded major engagements. In engineering, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez was running final diagnostics on the reactor systems.
She'll give you everything she's got, Commander, he promised.
These old destroyers weren't built for pretty, but they were built to fight. In the weapons bay, Gunnery Sergeant Williams was checking the loading mechanisms on the missile tubes.
We've got enough firepower to hurt them, ma'am.
Question is whether we'll live long enough to use it all. In medical, Dr. Sarah Kim was preparing trauma bays and surgical equipment for the casualties they both knew were coming. I've got enough supplies for about 50 serious injuries, she reported.
Let's hope that's enough.
Maya made similar stops throughout the ship, checking on her people and ensuring they were as ready as possible for what was coming. She had learned during her first command that leadership wasn't just about making tactical decisions, it was about being present for the people who followed those decisions into harm's way. 2 hours before the attack was scheduled to begin, Maya received an encrypted message on her personal communication system. The sender was identified only by a code she recognized from her time at Jefferson High School. Derek Lawson had found a way to reach her through official channels. Maya, the text message read, saw the news about Haven on the feeds. No, you can't respond due to operational security, but wanted you to know that we're all thinking about you and your people. My students have been following the war more closely since your visit. They understand now what you meant about the galaxy being dangerous. Whatever happens out there, remember that you're fighting for more than just military objectives. You're fighting for the right of kids like mine to grow up in a world where they can choose their own futures. Stay safe, and come home when you can. Maya stared at the message for a long time, thinking about the auditorium full of teenagers she had addressed 6 months ago. They seemed impossibly young and innocent from this perspective, but they were also the reason this battle mattered. Every human child deserved the chance to grow up free from the fear of alien conquest, to choose their own path in life rather than having it dictated by hegemony occupation forces. She deleted the message according to security protocols, but kept its meaning close to her heart as she returned to the bridge for final preparations. All stations report ready for combat, Commander Singh reported as Maya took her position in the command chair.
Fleet communications are nominal, Torres added. Admiral Chen is requesting final readiness reports from all vessels. Maya activated the ship-wide communication system, knowing that her words would reach every crew member aboard the Valiant. This is the commander. In 10 minutes we will engage a superior enemy force in defense of Haven Colony and its 2 million inhabitants. We will do this knowing that the odds are against us, but also knowing that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. She paused, gathering her thoughts for what might be her final address to the crew. 6 months ago, I spoke to a group of high school students about military service and the price of freedom. I told them that war isn't an adventure or a game, but a necessary evil that allows people to live their lives in peace. Today we have the opportunity to prove that those words meant something. Around the bridge, her officers worked at their stations with focused intensity, running final system checks and preparing for an engagement that would test every aspect of their training and experience. The hegemony believes that humans are weak, that we will surrender rather than accept heavy losses in defense of distant colonies, Maya continued. They believe that our compassion and reluctance to sacrifice lives makes us inferior warriors. Today we're going to show them that human compassion isn't weakness, it's what makes us worth defending, and what gives us the strength to fight against impossible odds. On the main view screen, the enemy fleet hung in space like a swarm of metallic insects, their weapons systems charging and their formation shifting into attack configuration. In a few minutes, those ships would be trying to kill everyone aboard the Valiant, and Maya's crew would be responding with everything they had. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, the fleet commander's voice came over the communication system. Execute Operation Prometheus. For Haven, for humanity, for the future we're fighting to protect. Maya leaned forward in her command chair, feeling the familiar mixture of fear and determination that preceded every battle. All ahead full. Target the enemy left flank. Let's show them what human stubbornness looks like. The Valiant surged forward with the rest of the destroyer squadron, racing toward an enemy that outgunned and outnumbered them by an enormous margin. But they were fighting for more than just tactical objectives or strategic positions. They were fighting for the right of teenagers on distant Earth to attend career day presentations and worry about normal problems like college applications and part-time jobs. As the first enemy missiles began streaking toward them across the darkness between ships, Maya thought about the girl she had been just 3 years ago, angry and isolated and convinced that nothing she did would ever matter. That girl could never have imagined sitting in the command chair of a destroyer, leading hundreds of people into battle against impossible odds in defense of everything she held dear. The war with the hegemony was far from over, and the outcome of this particular battle remained uncertain. But Maya had learned something important during her journey from bitter teenager to decorated officer. Sometimes the most important victories aren't the ones that make headlines or earn medals. Sometimes they're measured in the simple fact that somewhere, in a place of safety you helped protect, ordinary people are living ordinary lives and dreaming ordinary dreams. The battle for Haven was about to begin, and, regardless of its outcome, Maya Chen, the battle-scarred girl who had confronted school havoc and found her place in the galaxy's larger conflicts, was exactly where she belonged.